Jose, are you online?
Yes, ma'am.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well this evening as well.
I am. Listen, I'm going to just read a little bit about your bio so that my audience will have an idea with regard to who I'm talking to, if that's okay with you.
Yes, certainly.
All right. Okay, so Jose is deeply passionate about making a difference and has a rich history of community service spanning over 25 years. And he has served as a city council appointee to the City of San Antonio's Affirmative Action Advisory Commission, Airport Advisory, and the Tax Phase in Advisory, and as a Bexar County delegate to the Emergency Services District. Additionally, Jose has served as a board of director for several national and local nonprofits. Jose, now in his third term, or 8th year as school board member, elected to the Board of Trustees for Judson Independent School District in 2010 and re-elected in 2013 and 2017. Judson ISD is a growing district, the fourth largest in San Antonio, with a student population of 23,000 students, pre-kindergarten through the 12th grade, and he is driven to provide students with the best pathways for college and career success. Whether addressing organizational efficiency, teacher retention, college readiness, or social emotional support, his focus is on student achievement. And professionally, Jose is a director of resource development for the Southwest Preparatory Schools, a charter school district with an enrollment of nearly 1,000 students. He has led development teams for the Adelante U.S. Leadership and Educational Fund, the Salvation Army, and the American Diabetes Association. He is a graduate of San Antonio College and Our Lady of the Lake University. So bottom line, if you can't tell from reading that quick bio of his 25 years of work, he's a giver, and he contributes to the society in a large way. Thank you for coming to the show, Jose. Can you tell us what I haven't read about you? Tell us something we don't know.
You know, I was a product of a military family. My father spent over 20 years in the Air Force. So while I was growing up, I traveled extensively. Every 3 years, I was at a brand new school. And talk about changes. I mean, there were always change. But I've enjoyed the perspective that traveling everywhere, essentially, has brought to me.
So, I'm sure being a military brat, being a son of a parent who was in the military, you moved a lot, you moved around quite a bit, so you probably have an understanding of children who do move a lot, are displaced. What is your goal with regard to education? Fill it in. What are your dreams and aspirations? What do you want to do with the rest of your life in the education?
I'll tell you how it sort of all began. I've met a number of people who are passionate about education, as I am, and who are very involved in the community. And I'm often asked, how did it all happen, or why, or I mean, how do you get to this point? And I can tell you vividly, in 2009, a year before I won my first election, I was driven because the district in which I lived in had a failing performance portfolio, which, I had daughters about to enter the district. I did not want them to be in a district that was not at the appropriate level. And so I was concerned. I was a concerned parent on top of all of the other engagement and activities I was in. But I'll tell you, the 2010 Jose Macias that won on the platform of change and college readiness and SAT development and all of that, it's taken 8 years, the start of my third term, to truly start to realize how to implement and work throughout the bureaucratic process to ensure that these objectives are met. And one thing that I will say that is always intriguing to me is that the average tenure of a school board member in Texas is 6 years, 2 terms. So it took my third term to really start seeing the benefits of what had started in 2010. So when I ran back then, it was about, ensuring that our students have the opportunity for college. And I used one metric, which was the SAT test, to determine if our students were competitive for that exam and if they were thinking about college. One test, SAT, ACT. So when I ran in 2010, I made that a primary focus. Back in 2010, within the Judson Independent School District, we had about a 45 to 50 percentile of our seniors that had taken the SAT. 8 years later, we're at 96% of our students that take the SAT and are able to access SAT prep in preparation for this important exam for college entrance. So that's only one example of many that were part of the initial platform that I'm happy that we're at this point, but we still haven't reached that pinnacle, if you will, because the pinnacle would mean you have higher SAT scores, you have a stronger average of SATs, you have more scholarships as a result of this, and you have more students focused on the college and career path. That's sort of my real simple ultimate goal, using one instrument of measurement.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you're a Texas school board member, and I'm sure you've heard about essentially the teachers that have gone on strike in the state of Oklahoma and now here in the state of Arizona. My high school senior kid hasn't been to school since Wednesday. They were off Thursday, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. They resume Wednesday, I believe. So they're going to be off school for 4 days. The teachers did get a raise. According to the Arizona governor, he is going to give more money, throw more money with regard to education, which is needed. How do you feel about that with what's going on in Oklahoma, in Arizona? I do support the teachers. I understand why they did what they did. And I'm glad that they were able to get some of the things that they asked for.
Well, I certainly have been observing this trend of teacher strikes. It even happened in Chicago, and I want to say Kentucky. There were a lot of dissatisfied teachers with regards to their compensation and recognition. And so in Texas, where obviously I have my work to contend with, I am very supportive of our teacher union. But unlike the states of Arizona and Kentucky and Illinois and Oklahoma, our teacher union hasn't exercised its opportunity to strike. And I would say, because we are trying to be responsive, in Texas, it's no unknown fact that we are not putting enough resources in education. So there are some frustrated academics that state we're not doing enough. I believe the last assessment of our per capita expenditures on education ranked Texas in the 44th or 45th state in the union using funds for education. So I am extremely empathetic to teachers who are essentially saying we need support from our legislature in order to make an impact. Teachers that do not have the resources and fundamentally compensation, that's an issue. Last year, we had an opportunity to not give raises due to budget shortfalls, but one of the things that I was pressed to do was to pass a raise in addition to a retention incentive. We can't call it a bonus for legal reasons, but basically a retention incentive that helped tell our teachers we appreciate them, we're proud of them, we want them to stay in the classroom. One of the things that I will say that's important with compensation is that teachers stay in the profession. one thing that I've noticed in my district alone is that turnover rate is extremely high. When your turnover rate is high, it means you have a rotating door of teachers, which means you do not have the stability in the classroom, and there's always a learning curve for a new teacher. So for legislatures and for school boards and for state officials not to recognize the importance of teachers and the importance of keeping them in the classroom is a disservice to our students. So, you know, what's happening in Arizona is beautiful. I truly embrace what is occurring there. And sometimes a show of action like what we're seeing there is necessary in order to move forward.
Right.
So I'm hopeful that the ultimate return of this effort means that the legislature recognizes this effort. One thing that I will say, though, that's equally frustrating is that sometimes the call to action from an educational front is not supported at the ballot box. So I'm always amazed that sometimes the incumbency of certain representatives continues the philosophy of not putting enough money in education. I would suspect in Arizona it's the same. You know, what is truly the value in that state? Is it the education of all children, or is it supporting the incumbents that sort of support a certain platform? That truly will undermine the student achievement every time.
Now, I know you've participated as a school board, as a board member on national and local nonprofits there in Texas. What is your vibe? What sense do you have with regard to high Hispanic school districts, such as the one that you essentially oversee in San Antonio, Texas? I believe it's the fourth largest Hispanic populated school district that you participate in. But what do you see the needs are with regard to Hispanic, Latino, Chicano, Tejano communities? Is there more of a need there? Is there more parental involvement that needs to take place? Help me out here.
Of course. I mean, I've been looking at this from all angles, and I'll tell you the new position that I've taken as the Director of Resource Development for Southwest Preparatory Schools, which is a charter school, is now providing a perspective that's 360 degrees. I've seen education from a taxpayer, independent school district perspective, as well as a charter. So school choice is extremely important in Texas, and that's the language that's coming about. But what I do hesitate and where I stop is where the resources that are allocated to different school districts needs to be equitable. If we certainly create a mechanism where that equity does not exist, we're not truly impacting the entire community.
Can you give me an example of that?
Well, an example would be the resources. Let's look at one of the poorer school districts in San Antonio, which would be Edgewood ISD. In terms of their resources, their property tax value is not on par with some of the areas of our community in San Antonio that have a higher per tax. As a result, there's more resources for gymnasiums. There's more resources for band equipment. There's more available to them than what you see at a smaller district that doesn't have that tax base. I mean, they have students, but they don't have the revenue to embark on some of these programs that some other districts have. And so there has to be some equity built in to truly help all of our students. And I'm not meaning that, you know, it has to be 50-50 all the way around, but essentially closer to equity so that, you know, we are providing support for all students. I'll give you another real example. In some of our poorer communities, you have a higher at-risk population. Sometimes when we have new teachers come in, we haven't adequately trained them to address economically disadvantaged populations. And so as a result, they burn out. Sometimes you do not see that in some of our more affluent districts where there is more support. I don't know if they have better programs, but the result is the turnover rate at a poorer school district sometimes is 10% higher than some of our more affluent districts. So then you have you do not have equity in the classroom. you have higher turnover, you have more first-year teachers, and that's a problem.
Now,
if we're trying to address this issue, I'm sorry, go ahead, DeeDee.
Well, I'm a little confused because here in the state of Arizona, Lydia, by the way, Lydia Hernandez, you know her, she introduced me to you. She is my co-host. She comes on the show every now and then as her schedule sees fit. But she's a school board member of a high Hispanic populated school here in the Phoenix area, and they get Title I monies from the federal level. Is that not happening in San Antonio? And in fact, some of the teachers in the Title I schools get paid substantially more than, say, a teacher starting out in a prominent area does. Help me out. Why?
Sure.
Why isn't that going on in San Antonio?
We are eligible for title funding, and we do receive title funding on numerous campuses that are in the socioeconomic areas of economically disadvantaged. The problem that I have found is that, are we truly allocating title funding to meet the bottom line? I'll tell you, there's a program under the title umbrella that really concerns me. It was a program that's a backpack program. And that backpack program, we spent, $450,000, $500,000. And the premise behind that program was to provide economically disadvantaged kids with backpacks filled with books of their choosing to read over the summer. The problem was there was no way to ensure the students read the books. There was no opportunity for the child to come in during the summer and get any help with reading the book. For all we know, they went home and chucked them. And that type of expenditure without an evaluative mechanism to determine if we are wisely spending resources, to me, meant we just wasted $450,000 to $500,000 in title money that could have been earmarked for increased instructional aids and tutoring, which is something that I'm working with my colleagues on my board to recognize. We have since dismantled that program, but it was in effect for 2 years before.
Whose idea was that?
I'm sorry?
Whose idea was that?
I don't know. That's everyone. It just was something they did last year. So it's frustrating when these things happen, but as board members, we are given the authority to review programs, and we should be looking at efficiencies of every tax dollar, which includes title funding, to ensure we have the resources to be reallocated so that we can bring that equity. And so that's sort of what I've seen in how we've spent some title funding, and most of it is spent on payroll. So we have what we call academic deans. We have different positions that are funded with title funding. And I've asked the question, what has been the impact on that campus? Have we seen an increase in test scores? Have we seen increased parent engagement? And that's sort of the mindset, because sometimes I think people just think since it's federal money or state money that's not part of our maintenance and operation fund, you can just do whatever you want with it. But that's not true. Those dollars are designed to help make a difference. And so I like to think that in my district that we're looking at that. And so I certainly would echo that sentiment for every board member to look at the efficiency of title spending.
Now, when I was visiting with you, you were talking about what a teacher implemented in her curriculum that saved a life, and that really stuck with me. I think that's going to stick with me for a long time. But tell us about what that teacher did with regard to the journals and how it saved a life.
Well, I'll step back a little bit. In my district, one summer, there were two of our students. One had just graduated, and one was a sophomore. And they met at the elementary campus, literally across the street from my house. And there were kids in an after-school program at the time at the facility. What took place was the beginning of a drug buy. And what happened was the younger student approached the student with the drugs who just graduated, pulled the gun out, and said, I want the drugs. And of course, the student just graduated said, heck no. They both pulled guns out on one another. A gunfight on one of our campuses. One was hit in the shoulder, a young man, the guy that was actually trying to rob the other gentleman of his drugs, and the other guy was hit in the arm. So they both ran off. Unfortunately, the senior who just graduated was hit in the arm, and it severed an artery. He bled out as soon as he got home in his car with the car running. The other guy rushed to the hospital, and now he's spending life in prison. And it just irked me to no end to realize that what were these kids thinking? I mean, are we seeing an influx of more drugs and gang activity in our community? Well, fast forward, there's been 4 more fatalities that have been gang and drug related, which tells me that we are not doing enough early to address the needs of our students. It dawned on me that we have a social responsibility to bring the power of education to every student, not just the ones that want it, every. So I met a teacher actually at the charter school district that I had met over at Southwest Preparatory Schools. Wonderful teacher. And so in suicide, part of every teacher training especially the pre-K through 5th ballpark, because that's where, believe it or not, we have students that go off the path. They think it's middle school or high school, but it's elementary. If we're not hitting it at that point, and I'll tell you that I did have an issue once where a parent had described their dismay that their daughter was suicidal and on drugs. They never saw any indication of it because she was an A student. So sometimes students hide their issues because no one's asking them, no one's talking to them. And so the occurrence of this young lady, she was cutting, and of course the cutting elevated to drinking and drugs, and then it elevated to suicidal tendencies. And thank God they caught it, but had they not, something devastating could have happened to this child. Well, if we would have had intervention, strong intervention, not reactive, but proactive intervention in elementary, it could have given this child information on how to address issues at home. She was a product of a sexual assault. That's where it all began for her and why she started cutting and no one asked her. And she was not comfortable enough talking about it. So it dawned on me with all of this that I tell you that we have students that are hurting, and we have students that are not focused primarily on the end game, which is college and career readiness. They're surviving, and that is very customary in some of our poorer districts, and it can't be that way if we truly want to break the cycle of poverty. We have to step up our game and allocate the resources to provide kids support so that they can think about what the end game is, which includes parent engagement. And I'm sorry if I'm a little long, but let me just explain this one little other program that I'm really proud of that we're instituting at Judson. I have a good friend of mine who started a program that begins in 1st grade. Now, the program's premise is to teach kids about colleges. So there's a lot of sing-alongs, and they talk about college. It's really great, but that's not the best part of the program. The part of the program I love and what I really pushed for it was that it takes every parent of every 1st grader and teaches the parent on what they need to do to ensure little Johnny and little Maria get into a career path that pays substantially or a college career path that really promotes their social status later in life. Because we're finding that parents just don't understand how important their engagement is. And then this is the best part. If parents don't show up in 1st grade to meetings to benefit their child's education, there's a red flag. Uh-oh, what's the situation at home? Do we have a single parent that can't make it? And what happens is an intervention plan is designed right then and there to provide extra tutoring and extra social emotional support to that child so that they stay on par with their peers. Isn't that just beautiful?
It is. It is. That is a good program, especially in the first grade where it essentially starts and it puts parents on the right path and on track that would help their children's education as well. Now, I'm going to take you back to the Arizona and Texas school discussion, the Southwestern educational system discussion. I did do a little bit of research. Salaries for those who have earned an Arizona teaching license are lower than in many areas of the country, with an average of less than $47,000 in the 2009-2010 school year. The starting salary for an Arizona certified teacher in certain school districts can be less than $35,000 a year. So you were right. What is a starting salary for Texas teachers?
Well, we've made an investment. The state of Texas and many school boards who adopted these budgets, we're starting our first-year teacher at $50,000 plus in many districts. But this is the other part. We realize that teachers need to be recruited into the field. Once they're in, the level of increase in salary is not as high. You may have to be part of be employed for 10 years just to get to 60,000. So it's really small and incremental once you're aboard. But when you first walk in, it's 50.
Well, that's way better than Arizona.
Well, and that's what I find ironic, because the state of Texas is notorious about not spending enough on education, but yet we are doing better. I would ask the question, and I'm sure the legislature's done the same thing, why aren't we seeing the results in the classroom?
You're sounding a little distant. Can you put the mic...
Sure. Can you hear me a little
better? There we go. Yeah, that's better. I can hear you better.
Okay. Fantastic. Sorry about that.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
No problem. The question that needs to be asked is, are we being efficient? Are the increased pay that we're providing a teacher going to give us the results we need? And I would say yes, because, again, we're talking retention. But so far, we're still working on that. And I know, like in Arizona, the accountability systems have changed, and in Texas, they have as well, which means every time we change the accountability system, there's a little bit of orientation, and it takes a while to finally figure out, hey, is this working or not? So we just need consistent accountability so that we know the work that's happening in the classroom is making a difference.
All right. Well, I hope to see you involved more at a national level. I do believe your heart's in the right place with regard to your goals in the educational direction. I certainly can tell. Where can our audience reach you if they want to collaborate with you on some ideas on how they can become a school board member in Texas or here in the Great Southwest? How can they reach you, Jose?
You know, I am social media is fantastic, and I know that you've tagged me on the social media feed. If they simply message me, I'll be happy to send them a contact email and a phone number where I'll be happy to talk. I think we need more advocates in education that truly care about our kids and that are willing to do the work. I mean, you don't become a board member and it just happens because you want it. You have to work at it as well. And so we need some dedicated people that want to roll their sleeves up and get to work.
Now, before we go, and again, to my audience, you can look up Jose Macias Jr. online on Facebook. Are you on Twitter as well, Jose? No,
I'm not a good tweeter. But Facebook, I'm awesome. So I'm happy to engage.
Now, we've got about 5 more minutes to go before we cut it off on the air. I want to circle back to what you said, which in my view was a gold nugget of this conversation, that it is your desire as an educator to break the cycle of poverty. Do you have any idea, is there an idea that you believe could help, any other ideas that could help break the cycle of poverty in high Hispanic or high minority populated school districts?
Well, I certainly have studied that. phenomena. And what we're seeing that's been the greatest challenge to those communities is the high mobility rate. It is a proven fact that when a child transfers from school to school to school, they lose time, they lose competitiveness. And so the mobility rate that we're seeing in our community is detrimental. So I've talked with county officials and state officials and city officials to find out what we need to do to help address the high mobility rate. That alone is probably the single biggest problem to ensuring students are on par, because we see it across the board. We have students coming from other districts that are 2 grade levels behind. So you start seeing that it's harder to get them back to where they need to be. And one of my good friends, his name is Tommy Calvert here in San Antonio, Commissioner Calvert. He's pushing a program that I fully support that will actually give schools resources to help families find support from nonprofits, but also locate possible rental properties or apartment complexes within the school boundary before they go and run somewhere else, because it's important to keep that child in the same institution. That way, alleviating the potential of a child going somewhere else and being behind. And if we can hit that mobility rate issue, we could start to really change things for that demographic that has been difficult. And I will tell you, in Hispanic Latino populations, the mobility rate in some of our poor districts is extremely high, and we have to stop that. But that's just one piece. I mean, the other piece we addressed was the social emotional aspect. We truly need to identify those barriers to learning in the classroom, and those barriers are a myriad of everything that happens in our community.
I don't know how you're going to reduce the mobility rate, though, particularly with the immigrant community. They move. I
know. That's my new challenge, but it certainly means we need to get to work.
Okay.
And that is certainly something I'm very interested in getting a solution behind.
Well, I hope that to see you to be active with school boards, on a national and a local level, and you've certainly got my vote. I know you've got Lydia's vote. And I hope to have you back as a guest and to do some more follow-up with regard to education advocacy. And thank you for being on the show. Do you have any final words?
No, I really appreciate the time, and hopefully I didn't go over, but education is important. Very important.
You did not go over, and education is important. Do you have any final words, though? Is there something pressing that you would like to leave with?
Just one thing I always like to say is that you only have one life on this earth, and God gave you that life. Make a difference. Get out there and just start changing things, because they need your help.
Aw, okay. Thank you so much, Jose. And with that, our director, Osvaldo, will be cutting us off the air. Thank you again, and I will be seeing you online. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Un hogar donde no queme el sol. No hay